woke up in an asylum experimented on. The incessant dripping of water somewhere in the distance was the first thing I noticed as consciousness slowly returned. My head throbbed, and a nauseating smell of antiseptic assaulted my nostrils. I tried to move, but my limbs felt heavy, unresponsive. Panic began to set in as I realized I had no idea where I was or how I got there. As my eyes adjusted to the dim light, I found myself in a small, stark room. The walls were a sickly shade of green, paint peeling in places to reveal patches of grimy concrete underneath. A single barred window high up on one wall let in a feeble stream of gray light. The room was sparsely furnished with only a metal bed, the one I was lying on, and a small, battered nightstand. I struggled to sit up, my movements sluggish and uncoordinated. My clothes had been replaced with a thin, pale blue gown that did little to ward off the chill in the air. As I swung my legs over the side of the bed, I noticed a plastic wristband. The sight of it sent a chill down my spine. I was in a hospital, but not just any hospital, a psychiatric facility. Fragments of memories began to surface, but they were disjointed, making no sense. I remembered an argument, a scream, flashing lights, but nothing concrete. How did I end up here? What had happened? My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching. The door to my room opened with a metallic groan, revealing a nurse in crisp white uniform. Her face was expressionless as she entered, carrying a small tray. "Good, you're awake," she said, her voice devoid of any warmth. "It's time for your medication." I opened my mouth to protest, to demand answers, but no words came out. My throat felt dry and constricted. The nurse approached, holding out 2 small pills and a paper cup of water. "Take these," she instructed, her tone leaving no room for argument. With trembling hands, I accepted the pills and water. As I swallowed them, a sense of unease washed over me. What were these medications? What were they treating me for? The nurse watched me intently, making sure I had swallowed the pills before taking the cup back. As she turned to leave, I finally found my voice. "Wait," I croaked. "Where am I? Why am I here?" She paused at the door, turning to look at me with an unsettling smile. "You're where you need to be. Don't worry, we'll take good care of you." With that, she left, the door closing behind her with a definitive click. I was alone again, my mind racing with questions and a growing sense of dread. Over the next few days, I tried to piece together what had happened. The staff provided no answers, deflecting my questions with practiced ease. Other patients I encountered in the common areas seemed just as confused and disoriented as I was. The days blurred together, marked only by the regular administration of medication and occasional therapy sessions that left me feeling more unsettled than before. The therapist, a man with cold eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, seemed more interested in my reactions to his probing questions than in actually helping me. One night, unable to sleep, I heard muffled screams echoing through the halls. The sound chilled me to the bone, and I pulled my thin blanket tighter around myself. What kind of place was this? As the days passed, I began to notice strange things. Patients would disappear without explanation, only to return days later looking gaunt and disoriented. The staff's behavior seemed to oscillate between robotic indifference and unsettling intensity. I tried to keep track of time, but it was difficult. The days seemed to stretch and compress unpredictably. Sometimes, I would blink, and hours would have passed. Other times, what felt like days would turn out to be mere minutes. One afternoon, as I sat in the common room pretending to read a tattered magazine, I overheard two orderlies talking in hushed tones. "Another one for the special wing," one said. "Poor bastard," the other replied. "Hope he survives the procedure this time." Their words sent a chill through me. What procedure? What was the special wing? The more I observed, the more convinced I became that something sinister was happening in this hospital. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the cracked ceiling, I made a decision. I had to get out of here. I didn't know how, but I knew I couldn't stay. Whatever was happening in this place, I wanted no part of it. Little did I know, my decision to escape would lead me down a path far darker and more terrifying than I could have ever imagined. The realization that I needed to escape became an obsession, consuming my every waking moment. I began to observe the hospital's routines more closely, looking for any weakness I could exploit. The staff's movements, the changing of shifts, the timing of medication rounds, I committed it all to memory. One day, during our allotted time in the fenced outdoor area, I noticed a fellow patient watching me intently. He was a gaunt man with deep-set eyes that seemed to hold a spark of intelligence absent in most of the other patients. When our eyes met, he gave me a slight nod, as if acknowledging a shared secret. Later, in the common room, he managed to sit next to me without drawing attention. "You're planning something," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the drone of the television. "I can see it in your eyes." I tensed, ready to deny everything, but something in his tone made me pause. "What if I am?" I replied cautiously. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Then you'll need help. This place, it's not what it seems." Over the next few days, we exchanged information in hushed whispers and coded gestures. I learned his name was unimportant in here, we were all just numbers. What mattered was that he had been here longer than most, and he knew things. Patients don't just get transferred, he told me one day as we pretended to play chess. They disappear. I've seen it happen. One day they're here, the next gone. No explanation, no records. His words confirmed my worst fears. But it was what he said next that truly chilled me to the bone. "There's a hidden wing," he murmured, his eyes darting around to ensure no one was listening. "I've seen them take people there. No one who goes in ever comes back out the same, if they come back at all." I pressed him for more details, but he shook his head. "I don't know what happens in there. But I've heard screams, and other sounds. Sounds that shouldn't come from a human throat." As the days passed, we pieced together more of the hospital's dark secrets. The medication they gave us seemed designed to keep us docile and confused. The therapy sessions were more like interrogations, probing for weaknesses and fears. And always, there was the lurking threat of the hidden wing. One night, unable to sleep, I snuck out of my room. The corridors were dimly lit and eerily silent. I made my way to the nurse's station, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure it would give me away. Luck was on my side. The night nurse had stepped away, leaving the station unattended. With trembling hands, I rifled through the files, searching for anything that might shed light on what was really happening here. Most of the documents were mundane duty rosters, supply orders. But then I found something that made my blood run cold. It was a report, filled with medical jargon I couldn't fully understand. But certain phrases jumped out at me: neural reconfiguration, memory suppression, pain threshold testing. At the top of the document was a symbol I didn't recognize, a stylized eye within a triangle. I heard footsteps approaching and quickly put everything back, slipping away just as the nurse returned. Back in my room, my mind raced. What I had seen confirmed my worst fears. This wasn't just a hospital. It was a front for something far more sinister. The next day, I shared my discovery with my ally. His face grew grim. "I've seen that symbol before," he whispered. "It's on the door to the hidden wing." We knew then that we had to act fast. Whatever was happening in this place, it was clear that our lives, and possibly our very minds, were at risk. We began to formulate a plan. Our opportunity came sooner than we expected. A new patient was brought in, causing a commotion that distracted the staff. In the chaos, my ally managed to swipe a keycard from one of the orderlies. "Tonight," he said, slipping me the card. "When the night shift starts, I'll create a distraction. You make a run for it." As darkness fell, tension coiled in my stomach like a spring. I lay in bed, fully clothed under my blanket, waiting for the signal. The minutes ticked by agonizingly slowly. Then, suddenly, alarms blared. Shouts and running footsteps echoed down the hallway. My ally had kept his word. The distraction was underway. Heart pounding, I slipped out of my room. The corridor was empty, everyone drawn to whatever chaos my friend had created. I ran towards the exit, swiping the stolen keycard at each door. I was so close to freedom I could taste it. But as I rounded the final corner, I came face to face with the cold-eyed therapist. For a moment, we both froze in surprise. Then his hand moved towards his pocket, and I saw a glint of metal. Without thinking, I lunged forward, tackling him to the ground. We grappled desperately, and I felt a sharp pain in my side. But adrenaline surged through me, giving me strength I didn't know I had. I managed to break free, stumbling towards the final door. The keycard worked, and I burst out into the cool night air. Freedom was just ahead. A fence separated the hospital grounds from a dense forest beyond. As I ran, I could hear shouts behind me. My side burned where the therapist had stabbed me, but I couldn't stop now. I reached the fence and began to climb, my hands slick with blood. Just as I reached the top, a hand grasped my ankle. I kicked out blindly, hearing a grunt of pain. Then I was over, falling hard on the other side. I scrambled to my feet and plunged into the darkness of the forest. Behind me, I could hear the sounds of pursuit. But I didn't look back. I ran as if all the demons of hell were after me. Little did I know, the true horrors were yet to come. The forest swallowed me whole, its darkness a stark contrast to the sterile brightness of the hospital. Branches whipped at my face as I ran, my lungs burning with each desperate breath. The wound in my side throbbed, warm blood seeping through my thin hospital gown. I had no idea where I was going, driven only by the primal instinct to put as much distance as possible between myself and that hellish place. The sounds of pursuit faded, replaced by the eerie silence of the woods at night, broken only by my ragged breathing and the occasional snap of a twig beneath my bare feet. As the adrenaline began to wear off, the reality of my situation sank in. I was alone in an unknown forest, injured, with no supplies, no idea where I was, and no plan beyond run. The cold night air bit into my skin, and I shivered uncontrollably. I stumbled on, using the moonlight filtering through the trees to guide my way. Every shadow seemed to hide a potential threat, every rustle in the underbrush a pursuer closing in. The forest itself seemed alive, watching, waiting. After what felt like hours, my legs finally gave out. I collapsed against a large tree, sliding down its rough bark to sit at its base. The pain in my side was now a constant, angry throb. I gingerly lifted my gown to inspect the wound. In the dim light, I could see it was still bleeding, though not as heavily as before. As I sat there, catching my breath, a new fear began to creep in. What if I had made a terrible mistake? What if I wasn't really in a sinister facility, but actually a patient who needed help? What if my ally and all my suspicions were just delusions, products of a sick mind? I shook my head violently, trying to dispel these thoughts. No, I had seen the evidence with my own eyes. The disappearances, the hidden documents, the symbol of the eye. It was real. It had to be real. A twig snapped nearby, jolting me out of my thoughts. I held my breath, straining my ears. There it was again, the unmistakable sound of footsteps, trying to be quiet but betrayed by the forest floor. Panic surged through me. They had found me. With a surge of desperate energy, I scrambled to my feet and started running again. But in my haste and the darkness, I didn't see the steep slope ahead. The ground disappeared beneath my feet. I tumbled down the hillside, a tangle of limbs and leaves, unable to stop my descent. Pain exploded through my body as I hit rocks and roots. Finally, I came to a stop at the bottom, dazed and battered. As I lay there, struggling to catch my breath, a beam of light cut through the darkness. Flashlights. Voices. They were getting closer. I tried to get up, but my body refused to cooperate. The fall had taken the last of my strength. Tears of frustration and fear welled up in my eyes as I realized the futility of my escape attempt. The lights grew brighter, and then figures emerged from the trees. I squinted against the glare, making out the forms of orderlies in their white uniforms. And there, in the center, was the cold-eyed therapist. He crouched down beside me, his face a mask of concern that didn't reach his eyes. "There you are," he said softly. "We've been so worried about you. It's time to come home now." I wanted to scream, to fight, to tell him that this was no home. But my body betrayed me. Whether from the injuries, the cold, or some lingering effect of the hospital's drugs, I felt myself slipping into unconsciousness. The last thing I saw before darkness took me was the therapist's smile, a predator's grin that chilled me to my very core. I awoke to the familiar antiseptic smell and the soft beep of medical equipment. For a moment, I thought perhaps it had all been a nightmare. But the aches in my body and the restraints on my wrists told me otherwise. I was back in the hospital, in a room I hadn't seen before. This one was larger, filled with more advanced medical equipment. And 4 drip fed into my arm, and electrodes were attached to my chest and temples. The door opened, and the therapist walked in, flanked by 2 burly orderlies. He smiled that same cold smile. "Welcome back," he said. "I must say, I'm impressed by your little adventure. Not many patients make it as far as you did." I tried to speak, but my throat was dry and raw. He held up a hand, silencing me. Now. Save your strength. You're going to need it." He turned to one of the orderlies. "Prepare the subject for the procedure. It's time we moved to more intensive treatments." Fear gripped me as the orderlies approached. I struggled against the restraints, but it was useless. One of them produced a syringe filled with a pale blue liquid. "Don't worry," the therapist said as the needle pierced my skin. "Soon, all of this unpleasantness will be behind us. You'll be a model patient, I promise you that." As the drug entered my system, the room began to spin. The therapist's face seemed to warp and distort, his eyes growing larger, more insectal. Was this a hallucination, or was I seeing his true form? The last thing I heard before consciousness slipped away was his voice, now inhuman and echoing. "Welcome to the special wing. Your real treatment begins now." Consciousness returned slowly, like wading through a thick fog. My head throbbed, and my thoughts felt sluggish, disjointed. I tried to move, only to find my limbs unresponsive. Panic rose in my throat as I realized I couldn't even open my eyes. Sounds filtered in: the hum of machinery, the steady beep of a heart monitor, muffled voices speaking in hushed tones. I strained to make out the words, but they remained frustratingly out of reach. Time became meaningless. I drifted in and out of awareness, never fully conscious, never truly asleep. Occasionally, I'd feel a sharp prick in my arm or a cold sensation spreading through my veins. Each time, the fog in my mind would thicken, and I'd slip away again. In my more lucid moments, fragmented memories surfaced. The escape attempt, the forest, being recaptured. But other images intruded as well, things I couldn't explain. Flashes of strange machinery, faces that weren't quite human, pain beyond anything I'd ever experienced. Were these memories real, or hallucinations induced by whatever drugs they were pumping into me? I had no way to tell. Eventually, after what could have been days or weeks, I managed to open my eyes. The room swam into focus: stark white walls, advanced medical equipment, and a large mirror on one wall that I suspected was an observation window. I was strapped to a bed, tubes and wires connecting me to various machines. As I turned my head, I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror. I barely recognized myself. My hair had been shaved off, and a network of thin scars crisscrossed my scalp. What had they done to me? The door opened, and the therapist entered, followed by two figures in hazmat suits. He smiled when he saw I was awake, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. "Ah, good. You're with us again," he said, checking the readouts on one of the machines. "How are you feeling?" I tried to speak, but my voice came out as a hoarse whisper. What did you do to me?" He patted my hand in a mockery of comfort. "We're helping you, of course. Your condition required specialized treatment. You should be proud. Not many patients are selected for our advanced program." As he spoke, one of the hazmat-suited figures approached with a syringe. I tried to struggle, but my body still wouldn't respond properly. Now, the therapist chided. "There's no need for that. This is for your own good. We're making you better. Stronger. Soon, you'll understand." The needle slid into my arm, and almost immediately, the room began to distort. The therapist's face seemed to melt, revealing something inhuman underneath. The walls pulsed and breathed. I squeezed my eyes shut, but the visions continued behind my eyelids. I don't know how long I was lost in that hallucinatory state. Time stretched and compressed, reality blending with nightmare. I saw impossible things, creatures that defied description, vast alien landscapes, and always, always, the symbol of the eye within the triangle. When I finally came back to myself, I was alone in the room. My mind felt clearer than it had in a long time, though my body was still weak. I realized with a start that I could move my arms and legs. The restraints were gone. Slowly, carefully, I sat up. My head spun, but I fought through the dizziness. I had to figure out what was going on, had to find a way out of here. I stumbled to the door, surprised to find it unlocked. The hallway beyond was deserted. Dim emergency lighting cast long shadows, and an eerie silence hung in the air. Where was everyone? I made my way down the corridor, using the wall for support. Each door I passed was locked, the small windows revealing empty rooms or strange equipment I couldn't begin to understand. At the end of the hall, I found a stairwell. The sign next to it read Sublevel 3. How far underground was I? I began to climb, my legs shaking with the effort. As I ascended, I started to hear sounds distant at first, then growing louder. Alarms. Shouting. The unmistakable sound of gunfire. What was happening? Had someone else tried to escape? Or was this something else entirely? I reached a door marked Sublevel 1 and hesitated. Should I risk opening it? What if I was walking into danger? Before I could decide, the door burst open. A man in a blood-spattered lab coat stumbled through, his eyes wide with terror. He saw me and froze. "You," he gasped. "How did you get out?" "Never mind. Run. They're coming." "Who's coming?" I asked, but he was already pushing past me, heading further down the stairs. I peered through the open door. The scene beyond was chaos. Emergency lights flashed, and smoke filled the air. I could see figures running, hear screams and inhuman roars. Part of me wanted to retreat, to hide. But I knew this might be my only chance. Whatever was happening, it was my opportunity to escape. Taking a deep breath, I stepped through the door and into the madness beyond. The corridor was a war zone. Bodies littered the floor, some in lab coats, others in security uniforms, and some that didn't look human at all. The walls were scarred with bullet holes and what looked like claw marks. I moved as quickly as I could, staying low, trying to avoid attention. Ahead, I could see a sign for the main elevator. If I could reach it, maybe I could get to the surface. As I rounded a corner, I came face to face with one of the creatures. It was vaguely humanoid, but its limbs were too long, its skin a sickly gray. Its face was a nightmare of misplaced features and too many eyes. For a moment, we both froze, staring at each other. Then it let out a shriek that made my ears ring and lunged at me. I dove to the side, feeling claws graze my back. Adrenaline surged through me, giving me strength I didn't know I had. I scrambled to my feet and ran, the creature's howls echoing behind me. The elevator was just ahead. I slammed my hand on the call button, praying it still worked. The door slid open, and I threw myself inside, jabbing frantically at the button for the ground floor. As the doors began to close, I saw the creature rounding the corner. Our eyes met, and in that moment, I saw something that chilled me to my core recognition. It knew me. The doors sealed shut just as it reached them. I felt the elevator begin to rise as inhuman fists pounded on the metal. As the elevator ascended, my mind raced. What were those things? Were they patients like me, transformed by the hospital's experiments? And why did that creature seem to know me? The elevator dinged, the doors opening to reveal the hospital's main lobby. It was deserted, showing signs of a hasty evacuation. Through the glass doors, I could see flashing lights, police, ambulances, fire trucks. I stumbled out into the night air, gulping it down like a drowning man. As soon as they saw me, paramedics rushed over, wrapping me in a blanket and guiding me to an ambulance. As they checked me over, asking questions I couldn't begin to answer, I looked back at the hospital. Smoke was now billowing from several windows, and I could hear the sounds of gunfire and inhuman screams from within. What horrors were still unfolding inside? What had I been a part of? And most terrifyingly, was I truly free, or had I simply moved to another stage of their experiment? As the ambulance doors closed and we pulled away, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. The symbol of the eye within the triangle seemed burned into my vision, a promise that the true nightmare was just beginning. The world beyond the hospital was a kaleidoscope of confusion and fear. Doctors prodded and questioned, their faces a blur of concern and curiosity. But beneath their professional demeanor, I sensed an undercurrent of unease. They knew something wasn't right, even if they couldn't put their finger on it. At first, I was consumed by my own survival. The need to escape, to understand what had happened to me, overshadowed everything else. I pushed away thoughts of my ally, of the other patients, focusing solely on piecing together the fragments of my shattered reality. But as days turned to weeks, the constant vigilance began to wear on me. In the quiet moments, when the adrenaline faded and the fear subsided, other emotions began to surface. Guilt, regret, a gnawing sense of incompleteness. Nights were the worst. In the darkness, memories bubbled up like poison from a festering wound. The face of my ally, his eyes filled with determination as he slipped me the keycard. The cold smile of the therapist as he loomed over me. The inhuman shrieks echoing through smoke-filled corridors. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had left something behind in that hellish place. Not just my sanity, but a part of my humanity. The thought of my ally, possibly still trapped or worse, began to gnaw at me. Had I abandoned him? Or had he, like everything else in that place, been part of some grand deception? As I grappled with these conflicting emotions, I began to notice changes in myself. My reflexes were sharper, my mind clearer. But with this newfound clarity came disturbing insights. The world around me seemed wrong somehow. As if I was seeing through a veil to something lurking just beneath reality's surface. One night, unable to bear the sterile confines of the hospital any longer, I slipped out. The cool night air hit me like a physical force, carrying scents and sounds I had never noticed before. I wandered the empty streets, my bare feet silent on the concrete, my mind a whirlpool of guilt, fear, and an inexplicable longing for something I couldn't name. I found myself drawn to the abandoned building where I had first awoken after my escape. It loomed before me, a dark monolith against the star-studded sky. As I approached, a figure emerged from the shadows. My heart leapt into my throat. It was him, my ally from the hospital. But he was changed. His form seemed to shift and waver, as if he existed in multiple realities at once. "You came back," he said, his voice a symphony of whispers. I wanted to run, to scream, but something held me in place. "What happened to you?" I managed to choke out. He smiled, a gesture both familiar and alien. I became what we were always meant to be. What you're becoming. As he spoke, the world around us began to change. The abandoned building melted away, revealing impossible vistas beyond. Structures that defied geometry stretched into an alien sky, and beings beyond description moved in the distance. This is what they were preparing us for, he continued. The merging of realities. The evolution of humanity. Part of me recoiled in horror, but another part, a growing part, felt a thrill of recognition. This felt right. It felt like coming home. But the others, I said, thinking of the screams, the bodies, the chaos of my escape. What about them? His expression softened, showing a glimmer of the man I had known. Not everyone survives the change. You did. I did. We were the strong ones. I felt tears streaming down my face, though I couldn't have said if they were from sorrow or joy. I'm sorry I left you behind, I whispered. He reached out, his hand shimmering with otherworldly energy. You didn't. You were always with me, just as I was always with you. We're beyond such limited concepts now. As his hand touched mine, I felt the last vestiges of my old self falling away. The world exploded into infinite possibilities. I saw the past, the present, the future all existing simultaneously. I saw the true face of reality, beautiful and terrifying in its complexity. And I understood. The hospital, the experiments, the escape, it had all been necessary. A crucible to forge us into something new. Something that could bridge the gap between worlds. As we stepped forward into this new existence, I felt a pang of sadness for the human race we were leaving behind. They would never understand the beauty and horror of what was to come. But perhaps, in time, some of them would join us. The eye within the triangle pulsed in the alien sky, a beacon guiding us towards humanity's new destiny. But this time, I recognized it not as a symbol of oppression, but as a gateway to infinite potential. We were no longer prisoners seeking escape. We had become the architects of a new reality,